Good evening. I want to call to order this meeting of the Wendell Town Board of Commissioners and welcome everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight. Our Pledge of Allegiance tonight, for the Pledge of Allegiance, we're going to be led by Police Chief Bill Carter.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chief. Our invocation tonight from the Wendell Council of Churches is Pastor Asa Bell of Pleasant Grove Baptist Church. Good evening. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Madam Mayor, thank you for being with us on yesterday. We enjoyed your presence at our 156th homecoming anniversary.
We enjoyed it very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Let us pray. Gracious God, our Father, you are such an awesome God. You're wonderful in all of your ways and all of your works. God, we bow with gratitude now for the many blessings that you have imparted to us. You've given us health. You've given us life. You've given us opportunity. God, you've given us community. We pray for those whom you have placed now in governance in Wendell. We pray that you would bless them, that you would keep them, that you would give them godly wisdom and knowledge, and that you would allow and impose integrity and honesty as those are guided, or as those things guide their decisions here on tonight and in the days ahead. Bless this community and all who are part of it, and we will forever be thankful to you for all things. We pray this prayer in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again. Do we have any adjustment of the agenda? A motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
The agenda.
Oh, sorry, the agenda.
So we have a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
There's no one signed up tonight for public comment. This consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Move to item number 4, recognitions, reports, and presentations, and hear from Town Manager Mark Collins. Item 4A is the presentation of performance management reports.
Notice the absence of a snapshot this evening, and as I promised, I would talk about what's coming next month with replacement of the snapshot tonight briefly. And in replacing the snapshot, we're looking at enhancing within your policy direction and adding more transparency.
Okay. Go.
Okay. Well, I said all the very important stuff while the mic was off, so I apologize to the audience. So, as we work to improve our performance management reports through our snapshot, some of our goals that we're looking at are including the work units and performance goals developed in the budget. We're trying to increase our transparency, accountability of what we do as a local government to our public, look for ways to improve efficiency in our operations, as well as make sure our operations are more effective. And by putting our data and what we're achieving in our performance measures out there, that's building that trust and transparency in what we do, and also provides an opportunity for management staff and policy leadership to look at ways to improve what we do moving forward. I will caution that as we start collecting data, you'll see numbers that you haven't seen before, and so you go, whoa! Well, oftentimes that's just the way things are, whether it be a call volume from a police report, or the percentage times that leaf and limb is picked up or not picked up. The more time progresses, the more valuable this data is going to be to the community. Initially, it's just getting an idea of what we do and how we do it. After a year, then we can start comparing this year to last year. After 5 or 10 years, then we're able to do budget trends and projections on how we're operating. So this data becomes very valuable to the organization moving forward. Additional to the performance goals and work units of the departments are your strategic plan goals and initiatives, and making sure those are reported out regularly as well. So obviously it would be hard to report on July's data tonight since July is not done, but in August we'll start reporting on July's data and moving forward with that lag in time. And it'll be at your August 26th commission meeting that you get the first full report. The new snapshot will start with just an overview of your top and high priority policy goals so that those are forefront in what the public and you see. Then we'll provide some key financial indicators and then some selected departmental operational statistics for awareness and education. So that'll be your 1 to 2 page snapshot, your summary, if you will, for the month. Behind that summary, we're going to add a wealth of data. It'll start with something that you received tonight, which is a strategic plan update. So it's all your initiatives and where we are. Gives you an update on all of those initiatives. It also provides whether or not the policy goal is complete, whether it's in process or if it's on hold, and it explains timelines and who's responsible, and if it's on hold, why it's on hold. After the strategic plan, there'll be a more enhanced monthly financial report, and then the monthly operating report will have all the performance measures and goals from the budget reported out with the numbers behind it. From here, this looks like a lot of ants marching in lines across the screen, but it's an example of one of the goal spreadsheets that you have before you tonight, being Parks and Rec. And so on the far left is management in progress and your strategic initiatives, the work that's being done. In the middle is a brief update. The color coding is at a glance to tell you whether it's blue complete, green in process, or yellow on hold. Gives you the date of the last update, so as we move forward, if nothing changes, that date's going to stay the same. But as more recent updates provide, you'll be able to see when the latest update was. It'll give you an opportunity to go, hey, this hasn't been updated in a few months. Can you elaborate a little bit on why? And then which department or departments are assigned the project. And that's it for the progress report on your snapshot. We look forward to providing the full document next month with data in it. And as you review the strategic plan update, if you have any questions, as always, feel free to contact me.
Okay, thank you. This looks great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to item 4B, presentation of new Youth Athletic Scholarship Program. We're going to hear from Parks and Rec Director Jeff Pulaski.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. During the 2019-2020 budget, the Town Board approved $1,000 to the Parks and Recreation Department as a new Youth Athletic Scholarship Program. Staff has reviewed this scholarship with the Parks and Recreation Commission on July the 1st, and they all agreed and liked what we had in place. So the Youth Athletics Scholarship Program is designed to provide financial assistance to all of our youth who may not otherwise be able to participate in our youth athletics. So we did come up with an application form that would be filled out by the parents of that child that would have to be done during whatever season they're asking for the scholarship in. And filling out the athletic scholarship application does not register for them program, and we do let them know that in the form. For eligibility wise, it will be for all youth 18 and under. They must be a Wendell resident, and we were felt strongly about this one due to it being out of our general budget, being paid for by taxpayer money, that the recipient must be a Wendell resident. Also, we included foster children being eligible for this scholarship program. The household must be eligible for free school lunches and receiving government benefits. With this scholarship, we're recommending that it would cover 50% of the total athletic cost. That way we can stretch more of the $1,000 to more children. So the parents would be responsible for the other half of the registration fee. The process would be, they would fill out the application during the registration period of that sport. Only one child and one activity would be allowed per form. And the staff would review the application and give the approval or denial of that application. And we did it as a staff since we would really need quick turnaround instead of taking it to maybe the recreation board, which only meets once a month, that if we got a scholarship in, we could review it right there as a staff. And also it helps keep a little bit of amenity to these families so that their names would be released as to who had applied for this money. The person would be notified upon their approval or denial via phone call from myself, and all applications would come to me directly. And then we do have the application form. Where's the clicker? And the application is in the original packet. But it is in front of you, where it would be pretty much a generic checklist that they could go down. It would not take them a whole lot of time to fill out and would be very easy to understand. But this was our recommendation for this youth athletic scholarship, and we're ready to roll it out as soon as we kind of hear from the board and the mayor on the direction you felt that we went with this.
Anyone have any comments? Well, I think you have absolutely captured exactly what we were trying to do. Thank you for that. And I've said it 100 times. I'm going to say it again. I like the idea and insist on privacy for the children. I don't think they even need to know themselves, and it's nobody's business that another family needs that. So I like the idea of it being kept confidential.
And then we would
important.
We would be able to report back to the board how many scholarships were given out per sports session without any names being attached to it. And once these applications are approved or denied, we're shredding them and getting rid of them so nobody would ever even know that they had applied.
Great. Any comments from the rest of the board? All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's move into our public hearings. Item number 5A is a public hearing on amendments to the arterial and collector street plan and to the Wendell Unified Development Ordinance as they relate to infrastructure improvement and transportation impact analysis requirements. Mr. Bergmark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. As just stated, this is proposed amendments to both the UDO and our specific transportation plan, the arterial and collector street plan. Requesting you hold the public hearing and consider taking action on this. It's impacting chapters 9, 16, as well as the Appendix C of the UDO, which is the collector street plan map. So in early 2019, we entered into an agreement with NC Commerce to do an economic development assessment with the town. Part of that assessment involved some engagement sessions, and one of those engagement sessions was focused on the Wendell Falls Parkway corridor to identify what types of obstacles were people seeing or impediments in terms of development along these areas. And so we met with kind of property owners who had larger undeveloped tracts along that. And one of the common items that kept coming up were the development improvement requirements of doing widening along Wendell Falls Parkway, where you had to go from a 2-lane section to a 4-lane divided section. This would be true of other roads, not just Wendell Falls Parkway, like Wendell Boulevard, portions of it, and Marshburn Road. And we're seeing that impact where developers are choosing to develop. Not exclusively, but if you just look at the pattern, it seems like they're generally trying to avoid the roads where you're going to have those larger improvement requirements and going more towards your South Hollybrook Road or going down Lake Glad Road, more so than the areas you would think that they would gravitate towards. So as a result of this information we got through this process, we're looking at making some changes to our infrastructure improvement requirements to try to reduce that burden on developers while at the same time protecting ourselves, making sure we're still getting improvements that we need, both for now and in the future. So we think that the proposed amendments do help balance that and take a little bit of that cost burden and away from the developer up front, share it a little bit more with the town, but in a way that makes sense and is rational. So you have as an attachment to your report, attachment A, kind of showing visually where those changes are, and I'll bring that up in a little bit. So some of the changes are actual changes to the map, to which cross sections apply, and those are shown in different colors. And other changes are more to the text of the ordinance, whether it's in the UDO or the arterial collector street plan. So the first three, and I kind of go through, I think there's 6 or 7, the first three aren't graphical, so I'll just kind of describe those, and then I'll bring up the map to show the rest. But the biggest one is probably looking at those main roads going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. How can we try to share that cost a little bit more fairly? So what staff is proposing is if you have an existing 2-lane road that's shown to be improved to a 4-lane road, and by that I mean when development happens, this is all development driven, when development happens, people along their frontage, whatever frontage they have along one of these roads, is supposed to improve their side of the road unless they span both sides and widen it for the 2-lane section to the 4-lane section along their frontage, along their side of the road. What we're proposing is that to try to have a more balanced approach, instead make it where they only have to widen to a 3-lane section up front, but still dedicate the right-of-way for the full 4 lanes. So if the town needed to, in the more distant future, have that 4-lane section, we have the room to do it without impacting already developed properties. But at the same time, that upfront cost to the developer is only making their half of a 3-lane section rather than their half of a 4-lane section, so it reduces that upfront cost to developers. So that's probably the largest change, although there are some other changes we proposed in here. Another is there's a cross section that calls for a 2-lane divided, meaning 2 travel lanes with a median, non-paved median with curb in the middle. We have these shown in various places in the plan that are shown in a yellow color, and that is very cost prohibitive if you're talking about existing roads, because that means essentially you'd have to take the middle of this 2-lane road, carve it all out, make it a median, and then widen outward. So we're proposing to essentially change all those that were shown as the 2-lane divided to instead be a 3-lane. So just you still have a center turn lane, the ability to turn, but it's a paved section. So in terms of a new road being built where there is no road now, those costs are about equal. But in terms of improving an existing road that's 2-lane undivided and suddenly making it a divided median in the middle, our proposed change is a lot more friendly to a developer building along it. It's also less right-of-way, so they'd give up 7 less feet as well. But it still gives us the ability to turn, which is the most important thing from a traffic standpoint. And the third thing I'll mention before I bring up the map is to balance this sum. All these requirements that we're going to be going over are essentially reductions to try to make it more balanced, a little more friendly to developers, with the exception of the transportation impact assessment, where we have them actually do an analysis of what impacts are their projects going to have on the roadway network, how many trips are they going to generate, where are those trips going to go, what's the existing load. Right now, this study is triggered whenever you're going to be generating 150 peak hour trips, meaning between 4 and 6 in the afternoon would be your PM peak hour, for example. So how many peak hour trips? Because that's when the most cars are on the road, that's when traffic congestion is really an issue. Currently, it's when a trip generates 150 peak hour trips, you have to do a TIA assessment. Since we're kind of backing off a little bit on the just automatic upfront improvements along your frontage, we thought it would be good to balance that with, let's take a look at the true impacts of each specific development more often than we do right now. So what we're proposing to do is make it, change it to 150 peak hours to 100 peak hour trips off the bat, and then have a little bit of have language in there that would allow a little more discretion from the planning director to be able to require it in some cases when it's 75 or more peak hour trips based on some case-specific factors. That could be things like looking at, are there already some approved developments that may not be in place yet, that we know that while this development by itself may not be triggering enough, there's another one that was approved 6 months ago that isn't built yet, that combined could create issues and we need to take a closer look at it. Is probably the best example, but there could be other things just like urban context. Is this right in the core versus out in the outskirts? Things along those nature that we could look at, and we might have more context to say this should probably be evaluated, even though it's at 85 peak hour trips rather than 100. And just for reference, when you look at these trips, generally a single home will generate about 1 peak hour trip during the peak PM. So people generally think that homes generate more peak hour trips, but for various reasons, such as different work hours, working from home, and so forth, it's not always the case. So it's usually around 1 peak hour trip for a single family home. So I'm going to go now to the map. I'm going to see how it shows up here, and I'm going to bring it up separately on the PDF to kind of describe the other changes that are a little more visual in nature, and that we're generally trying to look at the environmental impacts of some of these. We had some roads that were shown as going through areas that have now become under county protection with permanent conservation easements in place for Turnip Seed Preserve, Robertson Pond Mill, and so it's not really necessary now to show roads going through those because there's really no chance of it occurring. When this was first adopted, some of those were county owned, but they weren't necessarily protected in that way yet. So, you know what, I realized I brought up the version of the map that doesn't show the lines I've removed. This is what it would look like after the fact. One moment, please. These all say changes incorporated. Nope, that's still... These all say changes incorporated. Okay, well, I'll do this the more interesting way. And you do have an attachment included within your report that shows in kind of magenta squiggly lines the areas that where I'm showing roads would be removed through a scratch-off mark, but to give you an idea, you had roads that were kind of showing going through this area affecting Turnip Seed Preserve that were removed, that no longer show up on the proposed map. You also had roads... Is this going to work? Almost. Up in this area, shown as going through Robertson Pond Mill Preserve, you have a 4-lane road that was shown coming from Campo's plan that was, let me clear this off, that was coming and cutting across Weathers Road that's ultimately trying to connect Buffalo Road in Raleigh over to Doc Proctor Road in in Zebulon. And so it was kind of cutting across our jurisdiction, crossing over the creek, connecting to Old Bunch, then connecting like this. That showed up on our plan as a 4-lane divided road because that's what Campo had for it on their long-range plan. So it kind of got picked up when we did our plan as well. What that would mean right now, based on our language, though, is somebody would have to improve it, that section, to be that 4-lane road on a road that debatably may not really ever be, because it would have to cross Buffalo Creek, cross a lot of floodplains, and just is reliant on a whole lot, disturbing a whole lot of existing development that may not be development driven, or a lot of existing land that may not be development driven. Rather than us have someone make these improvements that are going to would have negative environmental impacts on Buffalo Creek, what we propose is just to remove that from our plan. That doesn't mean that the right-of-way doesn't have to be dedicated. There's existing language in our ordinance that still calls for us to get the right-of-way, just in case in the future that really happens. But that will be a very large project that won't happen for some time if it does happen. So we want to remove it from ours so that they aren't making the actual improvements, having that negative impact on the environment in those areas for a project that may never be. So we showed that as being removed, and it no longer shows up on this plan. And there were also some roads just right within a road that came down and connected off of Weathers down and was coming back to Robertson Pond Mill, Robertson Pond Road, that was impacting the preserve as well. So we removed that section as well. And so you'll see those on your attachment. And then finally, there was also a change shown, and I know that I actually talked to the property owner on this one earlier today, so there has been some concern expressed over this change, but where you see and I'll circle it here. Where you see this green road come in and tie into the blue, that's a future road. The green solid line means it doesn't exist right now. It'd be a new road connecting into a stretch of a little extension of Jake May Road going into Foxborough, essentially. On the current plan, that green road doesn't curve to the south and connect in. It just stays straight and connects straight into the blue line, essentially connecting this future road in the middle of Buffalo Creek. These lines are all conceptual in nature at this time. Our concern is connecting point A to point B. So none of these roads are supposed to, if it's a new road, are supposed to mean that's the exact alignment it has to go. But the current line that is shown on the plan is misleading, because in reality, if somebody comes to develop, it would never be able to connect where it's showing. It would have to come south in order to get out of the floodplain to actually connect. So that's why we're showing that curving down rather than just continuing straight. And it's something that, like I said, in reality, if somebody was developing, would kind of occur that way anyways as we go through the development review process. But we just thought it's misleading to kind of show it, to leave it the way it was shown currently. All right, so let me go back to the PowerPoint. Make sure I hit my bases on those changes that were affecting the map. And I do have a copy of the plan included within the PowerPoint. It just doesn't show up quite as well. So I talked about deleting the minor collectors affecting the preserves, the major thoroughfare. Oh, there was one change I did leave off. So the only thing I left off, and on this, although it's harder to see, you can see the areas where the roads are being removed. The only change I didn't mention was we have a kind of a future minor thoroughfare going on the east side of town here, and where it connects back to Wendell Boulevard, it curves. If you see at the very end, it kind of curves out, and they're trying to make it align with where Old Zebulon Road ties in. We're right there where it ties into Wendell Boulevard. It curves out to the right. That's curving through two other properties and curving right through a bunch of floodplain. Almost all that is floodplain. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't, again, from an environmental standpoint, from a practical standpoint, it doesn't really make any sense the way that's shown. I know why they did it. They're trying to make it line up with Old Zebulon, but in reality, that would never happen. So we just showed it connecting. It's going through the Watson property right before it does that curve. So we're just showing it connecting through the Watson property rather than cutting diagonally across it to then connect through an adjacent property in the floodplain. So otherwise, I hit all the rest of these points on the map, and hopefully that made sense. I apologize, I didn't have a copy of this as a PDF separate. And of course, there's language that supports this in the plan itself. So we included the language within section 9.5B to specifically say if it's a 2-lane going to 4-lane, you only have to build to the 3-lane. Still have to have the right-of-way in place, and the pedestrian facilities will still be installed generally at the 4-lane section, so you're not having to tear that up if you did need to widen it in the future. Language that gets incorporated into the TAA, taking away old language about 150 peak hour trips and adding the language I mentioned earlier. And there was also a little bit of old language about 3,000 vehicles per day in section 16.11a, so deleting that at the same time. The Planning Board reviewed this at their June 17th meeting and voted unanimously 5-0 to approve the proposed changes. In terms of a statement of plan consistency and reasonableness, the Planning Board found it to be consistent with principle number 8 from the comprehensive plan, which deals with ensuring local and regional interconnectivity and maintaining us as a walkable community, and found that it would be desirable to accommodate the future traffic needs while being a little more equitably distributed in terms of costs. So we are recommending approval of these changes. Again, we just see this as helping promote development on our strategic corridors in a manner that's more financially feasible for developers while still protecting the town. Be happy to take any questions you may have.
Does anyone have any questions from Mr. Mark?
So, just real quick, the changes you're asking
us to approve are the changes on our map with the blocks, right? So we're not making any changes to Wendell Boulevard or Wendell Falls Parkway?
So the Wendell Boulevard and Wendell Falls Parkway, the only thing would be that language that talks about, although it may show up on the map as a 4-lane, you only have to build to the 3-lane. So you're still dedicating the right-of-way for that full amount. So the cost is less, but it doesn't show up differently on the map. It shows up differently in the text in terms of your requirement to build.
So the landowners on Wendell Boulevard, they won't, I mean, essentially they retain the same amount of land. I mean, they still have to give up the land for the 4-lane, correct?
If I may, Dave, you heard from a couple residents dealing with the rezoning prior on the section from Painter Lane to, what's the road that goes to the elementary?
Lyles Dean?
Lyles Dean. In driving through that staff and talking with residents, if there was one change on Wendell Boulevard from what the planning commission originally saw, it would be that Painter Lane to Lyles Dean being changed from a 4-lane divided to a 3-lane cross-section. It's more built in that environment, and there are some stormwater and other utility impediments right adjoining the road that would be cost prohibitive in a short term to affect a 4-lane divided. But from Lyles Dean out to 97, there's still sufficient room and undeveloped land that the 4-lane divided would remain in place. So if the commission wanted to address a citizen concern heard previously, you could request to, pending what you hear from the public and what your decision is, you could approve with an amendment to Wendell Boulevard to divide the 4 and 3 lane as just described.
Thank you.
So just to make sure everyone's clear on what the manager was talking about, we're essentially, let me choose a different one. We're essentially talking about this black dotted section. Whoa, that's way too big. Excuse me. I'm having too much fun with this. This section right here. So if the change were made, as the manager described, that section of Wendell Boulevard between Lyles Dean, kind of at the corner of Knott Squares, down to Hanner Lane where the McDonald's is, would change on this map from a black dotted line to a blue dotted line, signifying a 3-lane undivided cross-section rather than a 4-lane divided cross-section.
But the property owners would still have to give up the property for the 4-lane, correct?
No,
Like in that little section.
3-lane
Gotcha.
change.
Yeah, so if it shows up, that's why normally the rest of these changes don't show a change on the map, because it's still the full right-of-way. So if we made this change, that road would actually change to the 3-lane cross-section. It would show up as blue and just be that right-of-way.
All the parts.
Right, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
I would just frame kind of the policy decision that y'all have, is that the cost of development is the cost of development. It's just a matter of when it's paid and by whom is really the policy decision. The road improvements are going to be needed because of development, and so it's whether or not the right-of-way is put into place as part of the transaction between a property owner and a developer, or whether or not the right-of-way is acquired later by the taxpayer after. And so what staff is recommending is maintaining that right-of-way requirement, which was also the recommendation we received from DOT in reviewing this in CAMPA. Because it's harder to go back after development and obtain that right-of-way and add significant cost to the total general fund taxpayer later, compared to the upfront dedication of the right-of-way upfront. That's a policy decision, though. That's one driven by a community. Staff is recommending that you not defer the cost to a later taxpayer and add to that cost. We're being fiscally conservative on the taxpayer benefit, and you likely hear from property owners up front saying that that's still keeping an impact on our conversation up front with the developer. Everything that staff is recommending tonight is reducing that cost of development. We're not increasing costs from what's currently on the books now. It's a reduction. There's a risk of reducing it to the point that you encourage less appropriate development than the town and the commission and the property owners themselves have said they want to see in that development. You're over-incentivizing to a later taxpayer cost. So that's the policy point before you, as staff has provided in a staff report. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments? All right, let's open the public hearing. And we've already had the applicant presentation. So if there's anyone who'd like to speak from the public, step forward. You have 5 minutes. State your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is, Kurt Phipps, 515 Lyles Dean Road. If my understanding on this is, with conversations, some of this has come about because Wendell can't charge an impact fee for developers. This is a way for Wendell to collect some money from a few landowners to put in the kitty to do whatever you want to do with it, according to the town attorney. I can't see a developer building half of a 3-lane road, so they're going to pay in lieu of. That money then goes into the town coffers to do as you please. When and if the road's ever built, DOT will build it, DOT will pay for it, DOT will buy the right-of-way when they build the road. And I think we're just, not being fair with all the property owners at the approach we're going with it. I don't have a problem if it's a new development and a road that's going to be in the new development being paid for by the developer. But when it comes to widening Wendell Boulevard, Pool Road, and Marshman Road, I just don't see that this is a honest way of going about it. If the intention is just to collect the fee in lieu of, because Wendell can't build the road, the developer can't build only half of it, so it's going to be fee in lieu of, and then if it's ever built, DOT will build it. They'll pay for it. We all pay gasoline tax like everybody else does. DOT will build it, and they will buy the right-of-way to build it with. And thank you for your time. I've said all this before, so I know you heard it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Paul White, live on Lions Club Road. Do have land that maybe intersects with this, but my biggest interest in talking about it would be, it's one thing that you build a 4-lane road through a field, which is Wendell Falls, and they're doing a major subdivision, and they got the power to go in there and to put the road and put the grass strip through the middle, and it all works. When we look at right-of-ways and we start talking about adding, we started drawing lines to build roads in 1962. I'm an old man, I was here when it started. I'll say the only thing that DOT's ever built is the one in front of the post office. They did the design work to come around the other side, and after they designed it, they backed out. What I don't want to see is we end up with a hodgepodge of wide here and narrow yonder. I can see the logic of what the town manager is saying, starting out of Wendell, because you've got properties you're not going to be able to get the land on, and you're going to end up with sidewalks that are going to be out of proportion. But we also let a bridge get put in by DOT. I don't think it's been about 4 years ago. Maybe I'm off. Time, when you get old, time moves fast, but that's on Pool Road. And, it's funny, over in Wake Forest, they built them real wide, and they're not being used yet, but we got a road stuck out there that's 2-lane. And I'm gathering that's why we're still just 2-lane on this side of it, when if you were going to do it, it needed to be wider. I will say that a 3-lane road gives you a center section where people can pull into, and it keeps your traffic moving, which is going to be one of the considerations. And when you get in that center lane, the traffic flows because you stay put till you can turn so it doesn't block up your traffic, which I think is going to be one of the worries of the future. When you have a major subdivision, then you still got the power for that subdivision to put in turn lanes. I just want to be careful that we don't end up with a hodgepodge of sidewalks and land that can't be put together. So I have a concern besides the small piece of property that I have in it. I got a real worry that we need to be careful. Thank you for your attention.
Anyone else?
Good evening. When y'all do your next budget cycle, could you please put a little extra money in for air conditioning in this room? It's hot up in here. I am concerned.
Can you tell, I know who you are, but can you
Excuse
tell your
me,
name?
Carol R. Hennett,
New clerk.
205 Dogwood Trail, Wendell. I could say former commissioner, but I don't think that would matter. For every 1,000 feet of road frontage you have, you're going to give up 8/10 to 9/10, almost an acre of land for the widening process. That's a lot of land to give up. I believe in connectivity. I believe that developers do need to pay their fair share, and I've always been appalled that Wendell didn't have the opportunity to have impact fees. I think that would be the answer to a lot of our questions, but other governments in their infinite wisdom took that away from us. The road on, and I'm only going to speak to Wendell Falls Parkway, and I'll be honest, I have a vested interest. I have a farm along with my two brothers. It's only 33 acres, 34 if you count my mother's home. You take an acre away, and that doesn't seem like a lot of land, but it is, because this property also borders on Buffalo Creek, and there are 11 acres that are not developable. So then today I look at this map and see that there's a connector road going right through the middle of this farm. It basically eviscerates the value of this land. I've never seen this road before, and I have been to the meetings. When I spoke to staff this afternoon, one of the rationale for this road was so the people who live in the development at the corner of Wendell Falls Parkway and Jake May can get on this road and get over to Eagle Rock Road. Well, you know, if they turn left, they've only got to go about 20 or 30 feet, and they'll be right back on Wendell Falls Parkway. So that doesn't hold a lot of water. Not only does it destroy the value of my property, but it completely guts the piece of property that joins up next to us, and that property owner is not available for comment. I don't have a problem with the 3-lane. Originally, when this came up, it was going to be a 4-lane divided highway all the way from Martin Pond Road to Jake May Drive. I don't know why Jake May Drive is this center point for the world in Wendell. It was going to stop being 4-lane divided and go back into 2 lanes, which made absolutely no sense. So I did meet with the town. Y'all were very open, and I appreciate that. Going back to 3 lanes is acceptable were it not for the fact that I'm, again, not only giving up land on the front of a small parcel of land, but then you're gutting the rest of the land. And this can happen anywhere. When lines get drawn on maps, it's just a flat map. I don't think that property lines are ever considered. There are a lot of small property owners here tonight that can suffer the same consequences. They don't have a great deal of land, and even in your document, you state that in 2019, meetings were held with large landowners. I was not invited to that. I am not a large landowner. Now, I have bogarted into a couple of meetings from time to time, but I didn't know about that one. I think that before y'all make decisions, you need to not only look at the things you're wanting for the town, but what you're wanting for the citizens in this town. You all will be making generational decisions with what you do, and you need to give that consideration. There are a lot of people here who can't even vote on these issues. I'm fortunate that I live in town, but for all these people who only live in the ETJ and have to suffer under the rules and regulations of Wendell, they literally have no voice. And that is completely unfair. And I think those things need to be considered. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Come right on up here. Give us your name and address, please,
Okay.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Billy Poole, and my address is 1521 Wendell Falls Parkway. And I was just wanting to comment what Carol said, that we're in ETJ and some of the decisions that are made would affect our property. I don't know if there's still a line. There was a line at one time from Wendell Falls Parkway that would go through some family land on Wendell Falls Parkway, which would include my property also, and then go through the farm that we have on Eagle Rock Road, my brother, sister, and I own. So that would be a large impact on us. So some of the things that Carol will comment would affect us also. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anyone else?
Lucius Jones, 410 Selma Road, and I'm one of those builder developers. In case everybody wants to know, that's my profession. I don't have any property on any of these roads, so I'm not here because I've got a personal dog in this fight. But when you go to reserving the property that you're talking about doing for a 4-lane divided highway, it's a lot of property. There's no developer that I know that's going to come along and buy a piece of this property and knowing he's got to build a 4-lane divided highway, or either donate the land to the town to build it. I've been in this town 76 years so far. I sat on that seat with you, Ms. Gray, for 14 years of it. The town has never built a road. Never. We paved some streets with CBDG money that we got from the county, but we've never built a road. DOT is in the road business, and when you bring a plan in to get it approved, they have to approve it. If they determine it needs a turn lane, then you got to put the turn lane in. If they say it needs 2 turn lanes, you got to put 2 turn lanes in. So as far as the development standpoint, they're going to dictate that. And you know, it's like someone else had said, you know, you can pay money in lieu of, but you know, where's that money going to be used? I think it's a taking of land, and if I was some of these people and I owned that land that you're about to take, I think we'd probably have to have a little legal discussion about that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Are there any questions from the board?
Dave, I just have a few. Mr. Phibbs had some questions on the money, where it went.
Sure, I'm glad you asked that. I wanted to address that. So any fee in lieu money that's requested by an applicant and accepted by the board has to be used for transportation improvements. It does not have to necessarily be used along that stretch of road, but it's not something that the town can just use for whatever they want. So it would have to be used for widening or a new road or paving or some transportation improvement somewhere in town.
So we would take the money from the developer, not necessarily build the road and then put it in an account, use it somewhere else in town.
I mean, we could use it on that stretch if we wanted to hold it. We have that prerogative, but it's not required. So we could use it to make an improvement in an area that was determined to be a higher need in town for a transportation improvement.
Has the DOT seen these plans?
They've seen the adopted transportation plan. They've not seen changing the cross sections that we've talked about as part of this. Although again, this isn't putting in any new roads on property owners where they don't exist now or anything along those lines.
So what would spur the DOT to come in and make, a 4-lane where we have a 4-lane on our map?
They probably wouldn't. I know people have made the statements DOT builds roads, and you also had Mr. White say there's only been one road built in DOT and it was in 1973. The reality is, if you're waiting for DOT to come and build all these roads for us, you're probably waiting a long time. And the gasoline tax doesn't go nearly as far as it used to be, and it's going to be a continuing problem as we get more fuel-efficient vehicles. So that's part of the reason why we look to try to have something that's more development-driven. DOT doesn't have the money to come in here and do everything for us. We don't have the money to just come up here and build everything for us. But if we get incremental improvements as development occurs, that's probably the only way we're going to realistically get improvements to happen.
But
If I can add on the funding side of that, the capital area MPO has funding streams to build projects and transportation plans. It requires a local match. All right, so fees in lieu can be used for those local match to offset federal and state funds to build roads that are needed as the town grows. But for periods of time when the town wasn't growing, the town didn't have to build roads. The town did not have the tax base to build roads. With the growth in the community that's already been approved, there is a need at intersections and roads for improvements to be made. And so proper fiscal controls and planning, such as, that's a great but allows this board and boards to plan the transportation plan to make those improvements. So there are local area project planning funds, LAP funding, like that is also on this agenda to do sidewalk improvements, the intersection improvements, and road improvements, and build roads. So that's all. So there is funding available from the state and feds, but nowadays it requires a local match to make it happen.
But if we provide the match, they build the road, correct?
Not necessarily. Our contractor would build the road.
They'd help provide funding, so you get federal funding towards it.
No, we match their money. I got you. They match our money.
Yeah. The intersection with Wendell Boulevard and Wendell Falls Parkway has warranted a stoplight for years. DOT is not going to install that. That's something that the town can apply for funding and put a match towards to get federal and state money to get that transportation improvement. So the only way to make improvements in our road system under the current state system, unless it's a larger arterial or collector road that they're moving people longer distances to participate in that regional funding system, which the town has not traditionally done. But to get the improvements that are needed in our road network, the town will need to consider moving forward.
And David, just to clarify, because there were several people that were complaining about the lines, these lines have already been approved, correct?
With the exception of the couple of realignments that are being shown. So, but yeah, all the rest of these lines, except for the couple where I mentioned, where are already approved in place.
Yeah, I recall. I remember I was one of 2 votes that voted against it, but these lines have been approved, so I think, tonight's not the night to talk about it, how bad it's affecting it, but,
I also wanted to just add, when there were comments about, the large property owners, by that we just meant we didn't send invitations to that to already developed tracts that had a house on an acre or two, because the purpose of this is to look at, for people that are trying to develop and that might be impacted by our development-driven impact improvements, our improvement requirements, what were they seeing? So it's not that you had somebody that had, 8 acres, 20 acres, 30 acres that wouldn't have received an invitation. It was somebody that had less than 3 acres and then already has a house sitting on it.
That was the meeting that he's talking about, was the Department of Commerce facilitated meeting. I believe the Hennets were at. So that was that meeting. It's the one that David's referring to, by large property owner meeting.
I have a few comments.
Go ahead.
I grew up in the ETJ. I grew up on a farm off Eagle Rock Road. Very first board meeting I ever attended, I was probably 12, 13, 14 years old. And the reason I came was the transportation plan. My parents received a letter in the mail with one of these maps with the lines drawn all over it. I remember thinking that it wasn't fair that people who lived in town got to vote for commissioners who control things that happen in the ETJ. And I've said this many times before, it was the strongest influence that once I moved into town that drove me to run for this office. I understand the plight of the people that live in the ETJ. My wife and I own land that's in the ETJ, and it has a road running, or it has a proposed 3-lane highway, or a 3-lane road running right through the middle of it. I'm not unaffected by this just because I live in town. So I understand it. One of the things I think a lot of people don't understand about the transportation plan is it's sort of like the building code. It's not saying that you have to build, just because there's a line on this map that you have to build a road there. Basically, it just says if you're going to make improvements, this is where the town, this is what makes sense. This is where the town would like it. And for the most part, a lot of them, if you show a need or whatever, they can be moved around. No one's saying that, you have to pay to build a road or do any of those things. It's just a guide for future development. And like I said, there's a 3-lane road that runs right through the middle of where I plan on building a house one day. And I voted to approve this map because if I don't plan on developing it, then it doesn't concern me. If I do plan on developing it, then there needs to be a road there. So I did want to point that out. The point that was made about the fee and lieu money, just being a way for us to get money in, I think Mr. Bergmark explained that well. And I've said before that I definitely think impact fees are an excellent way to deal with this issue, but that has been taken away from us by our state legislators who feel that, local issues are best solved by all of their great thinking in Raleigh. It's an issue that I brought up very recently. I would at least like to get a local bill up to Raleigh so they can at least tell us no. I know a lot of people don't like to throw things up there just to see them fail, but I say if you don't try, you can't ever succeed. I would love to see impact fees as a solution to this problem. As far as the statement of, if the road needs to be improved, DOT will do it. Ask the commissioners in Holly Springs and Apex how well DOT is doing keeping up with their growth. They're just not. I mean, their roads are parking lots. If you think Wendell Boulevard's bad, when carpool's taken into Wendell Elementary, go drive through Holly Springs in the morning. It's bad, and it's not getting any better anytime fast. We can't wait until we have 30,000 people in Wendell before DOT comes in and says, all right, fine, we're gonna widen the road. So, this is a way for us to improve our own roads, with local input, because by the time the state comes in, it's not gonna be, you know, we're gonna put in a turn lane, it's gonna be two with a turn lane, it's gonna be 2 lanes each way, with a median, and, you know, a turn lane on each side. Because when they come in, they're not coming in to just add in a little this or that, they're gonna come in and they're gonna thoroughfare it. Waiting on DOT, I would much rather we do it in-house. I would much rather we do it as the development comes. Getting rid of a lot of these 4 lanes with median and changing that over, I never liked the 2 lanes with the median. I think they look nice, but they're not very practical from a developer standpoint, and they're not very practical from a traffic standpoint. So I think getting rid of those is the right idea. Getting a lot of these out of the floodplains is a good idea. And this is a process that's constantly ongoing. We used to do this every 8 years. Now we're doing it every 4. That's right, Ms. Burmark? We're reviewing this transportation plan every 4 now, right?
That's what you want, that's what you get.
Yeah, that's right. Because one of the things is after 8 years, everybody that's affected forgets they were affected, and they come, what are you talking about? I've never seen this before. So we're going to try to do it on a little bit quicker schedule from now on, so that people are kept appraised of things. But otherwise, I don't have much problem with this plan. Any fee in lieu of money that comes in is still spent on transportation projects. We're not stealing land from property owners and using it to pay policemen in town. That's just not happening. It's used for transportation. It's used for, you know, places where it's needed the most, transportation-wise. So I'm in favor of this.
Anything to say? Okay.
Mayor, can
Sure.
Mr. Jones
Always.
said we needed to have a legal talk, but I want to get that part of the conversation started. It's not a taking, and the reason it's not a taking is because these lines are not reservations of specific locations on the ground. We went through this issue when the town adopted the plan back in 16, 17.
Yeah.
And as Commissioner Boyette said, it's a guide. It's a conceptual plan that shows where roads make sense, and it's a planning tool that towns are allowed to use. Some specific language, if you'll indulge me, I want to read this because I think you need to include this again as a part of this adoption of, if you're going to adopt this change, include this language in the ordinance. And this language was included in the plan that was adopted before. The specific roadway network established by the transportation plan is conceptual in nature. The final location and design capacity of roads will be determined as development occurs. The transportation plan is designed to aid the town in its review and consideration of development plans by establishing infrastructure improvement requirements and road cross-sections. But final requirements will be determined at the time a development is proposed, taking into consideration the impact of the development. And that's still true as a part of any change in this plan.
I would just add, to reinforce the part about it being a guide, these lines have not been engineered, is that correct?
Correct.
So we don't even know if they can really even be there because of topography and whatnot. So this, again, it's just a guide. It's just a guide to create connectivity. Okay.
Madam Mayor, can I make a motion?
You may.
I make a motion that we table this item until the other commissioners return and see at that point if they'd like to have a work session about it.
Okay. So we have a motion to table it until the others, with two absent tonight, to have a little work session about this. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Let's get all this together.
Madam Mayor, before we move to the next item,
Yeah.
can staff get a date certain on when we're tabling it to, so we know when to bring it back? Is that at your next regular meeting? First August meeting?
I don't know if we have time to get together between now and then.
Do you want this to be at the meeting, or do you want this to be a separate?
No, I'd like a separate work session.
You'd like a separate meeting?
Okay, we're tabling a public hearing to a separate special called meeting, just clarifying so we know what to do. Is that what was intended by the motion?
The public hearing's over. We held it, and I closed it, so that's over. So I guess we're tabling
The approval.
deliberation and approval or not, till there's conversation with the other board.
Just to clarify, are we tabling the decision to a meeting, but you want a work session between now and that decision? Or do you want to table the item to a meeting where we have a discussion on this and then you decide?
Table the item to a meeting
To go
and have a work
outside all
session
this.
between.
So we'll have
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. There's a lot going on in here.
What I just heard was that it would be to table the item to a future meeting after a special called work session on this topic.
Yes, that was my understanding.
Okay.
Is that-
Correct.
Okay. We'll move into our administrative items now. Item 6A is a discussion and action on changes to the town's facade grant program. Mr. Bergmark?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. As stated, we wanted to bring before you proposed changes to our facade grant program guidelines. The facade grant allows us to make aesthetic improvements to some of our storefronts and other buildings, often in the downtown, although not exclusively in the downtown. We've had different funding levels, and in the past, we haven't always had a direct local funding for the facade grant, although this past year we did have special funds that we got through NC Commerce to do an expanded facade grant program. That's not a reoccurring funding source, though. In the last year that it was funded for $4,000, and there was kind of a quarterly call, and it was limited to $1,000 per application. Now in the current budget, the town board, you all allocated $10,000 towards this, but the guidelines still reference that $1,000 limit per application. It's a 50-50 match, so they could request for a $2,000 or more project, they could request $1,000. As a result, now that we have $10,000 allocated, we're looking to try to increase that cap. And what we're proposing is actually just to allow it, and again, this is all at your discretion, to be up to the full $10,000 if you found the project to warrant it, and the project would of course have to be $20,000 or more for someone to request a full $10,000. So that's the first change. The second change is to just more clearly clarifying the language that the project can't be completed before it gets to you. Although that's kind of our interpretation right now, the actual language is open to interpretation. The third change would be, and this came out of the Appearance Commission meeting, to require 2 quotes be provided when they're providing us estimates. So when they have a proposal for improvements, they have to provide an estimate showing what it would cost. The Appearance Commission wanted to see multiple quotes just to make sure you're getting reasonable quotes being referenced. And the fourth change would be to require that an application be received at least 7 days prior to the next Appearance Commission meeting. The current language said it only needed to be submitted 5 days beforehand, just like a little more room to be able to make sure it's a valid request before putting it out on an appearance commission agenda. So again, this is all really meant to try to make it work with our current budget levels and also make it better achieve our goals. That current $1,000 cap is a pretty limited project. If we get a really more expansive improvement opportunity, we want the ability to go after it. Otherwise, we're probably going to leave some of this money on the table because it would take 10 or more requests to actually be able to use it. And again, we want to be able to kind of capture opportunities if we get a larger project in place. And I mentioned the Appearance Commission, they were briefed on this, and so this is a result of that discussion with them at their last meeting. That's all I have. If there's any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Burgmore?
I just have one. So I guess the number 3, the submittal of the 2 contractors, is there going to be any follow through with that? Are they going to be required to use one of those bids, or to prevent bait and switch type scenario to where they just get bids from contractors and then they?
So this is all reimbursement. So they're not getting any funds until after they've actually expended it. So there's nothing that says they have to use one of the 2 contractors, but it's to show that, or at least give us a higher degree of certainty that they are reasonable estimates that are being provided. And then after the project has been done, they would have to provide the actual costs incurred to us in order to receive the reimbursement money that was agreed upon. If they didn't spend as much as they were supposed to, then they can only get reimbursed for 50% of what they actually did spend. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the only other comment I would make is, in the past we've only voted on like $1,000. And I'm not a big fan of taxpayers' dollars going to private businesses. So, the last grant we bid on, had I known then what I know now, I wouldn't have bid on it, or I wouldn't have voted to approve it. And I think $10,000 is a lot of money. So the old way we were doing it was $1,000, but the max was, we budgeted $4,000, so that was 25%. Why couldn't we just divide the $10,000 into 4? And just do the max grant at $2,500. That way it gives more people the opportunity to get the grant.
I think staff was evaluating the cost of the actual projects that would be done, and the project that you can complete for a lower dollar amount is going to have a limited tax use value to our community. So we're trying to incentivize a larger investment of a project in downtown. This wouldn't be enough funds to encourage a significant investment, but it can make the difference on some of the aesthetic appeal outside that might drive further investment.
It can still be a $1,000 one, but it can be up to $10,000.
We can still get a $1,000 grant.
Or one
but
$10,000
you might
grant.
have a $1 million project or a $400,000 project that y'all want to incentivize some additional outside improvement to make it that much more special for you downtown, and encourage that higher investment.
I would still like to see, I understand the projects cost money and the $10,000 can be used up fairly quickly. So I would still like to see the opportunity be for more than one person per year. And I don't want $20,000 in the budget, I'm saying.
But that's the good kind of problem to have, is to have more applicants than we have resources, because that means there's a lot of interest and investment in your downtown. So I agree, sir. That would be a great problem to have.
So I guess,
Have their applications been going well up until this time? I know we had it and then we didn't fund it, but it seems like I remember we were running out of people who were interested in it.
So,
but I know that goes in cycles as well. So.
Right. I mean, I kind of was not as directly involved with that aspect of it, but that was the sense I got, is that we were at least having some periods where it was slowing down some. Now, I will say we had a request come in towards the end of last fiscal year where we didn't have it funded, and we said, okay, we'll go ahead and submit because we may have it funded here shortly in the new budget cycle. So there's not a lack of interest right now, I can say that.
Okay. At our current, the way it was written up.
Right. I mean, that was submitted before this change. So but this change could impact, what they might be eligible for.
My only issue with it is the 2 quotes from contractors. So regardless if the building owner uses a contractor or not, I mean, some of them may want to do it themselves, so it doesn't matter to me if they had two quotes or not, as long as they're providing receipts for the transaction. Anybody that's gonna meet a $10,000 match is gonna spend a significant amount of money. And as a business owner, I would say this is a loss leader, and it would be my suggestion, we take a calculated risk and look at the fact that, yeah, we're spending $10,000, but the tax revenue that's gonna come back from a commercial business in town that has invested enough money to receive the full $10,000 is gonna be significantly higher than the $10,000. And as far as, it's great to leave it open for more than one applicant, but if one guy comes along and can, wants to invest that kind of money in town to get the $10,000 that's proposed, then so be it. To me, that's, he who dares wins. The first person to it gets it and if there's another business that would like to have it, they can, wait if it's that big of a deal to the next time it's available, or, I don't know, I think it's a good incentive for a medium-sized business.
I think you need to have contractor bids, though. I'm not sure I understand what you mean about not having a bidding process.
So if, let's just say you owned a building downtown and you wanted to contract an awning and new windows and things like that, but you were going to sub it out yourself, you were going to manage the work.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to use, if you don't want to call two different people to get bids on that,
Mm-hmm.
my point is I don't see what the issue is as long as the money was spent. So it's not to me, it's not our job to manage the business owners and, making sure they're getting the best deals on their money spent. If they spend $300,000 to renovate a downtown building that's going to bring a restaurant or whatever else, fill in the blanks, I don't see what difference it makes how many quotes they have. Does that make sense?
Can I speak to
Not
that?
completely, but go ahead.
There's one thing that, you're right that you're not going to be reimbursing them for more than half of what they applied for, because you're going to have to get actual costing. So that's true. But at the same time, you're not always necessarily going to be funding people at exactly 50% what they're asking for. And if someone came and gave you an estimate that said they're spending $15,000 and you decided to award them $4,000, it might have been based on the idea that they were going to be spending $15,000, and then they come back and they only spent $8,000, and you might say, well, if I knew they were only spending $8,000, I might not have awarded them $4,000. I might have awarded them $2.5 or $3,000. So that's one reason why it might be good to get more than one. But I mean, you're right. You're not at risk of still giving them more than 50%, but that's just one thing that could impact your thinking of how you allocate funding.
Could we split the difference and say contractors or suppliers? Because the business owner isn't going to build their own awning. I mean, or they're not going to make their own windows. So, I mean, they're going to have to get quotes for that. So instead of just saying contractors, could you also say suppliers? And then that way we would have a little something up front.
I think or subcontractors would maybe be what it would.
Yeah, we weren't really trying to focus on the contractor part. We need two estimates. We need two cost estimates.
Yeah. No matter where they come from, if I go myself and talk to a window person or an awning person or whatever, or if I hire a general contractor and he or she goes and gets those things.
Yeah, whoever's giving you that pricing, we need two pricings.
Right, okay.
Is that more reasonable?
I'm trying to think of a better way to put, because I've totally missed whatever I was trying to convey
I
to
think
you
you
guys.
got in a circle.
So, the business owner is spending their money, right?
Yeah.
And I don't believe that it's the town's responsibility to ensure that they got two quotes for sub or however they're going to do it. If the money is spent and they have a receipt for that,
So you don't think the town should make sure they get the best deal?
Correct.
That's what you're leading.
Let me clarify, because I think it's the point at which the information is being used. The quotes are being used in the application process by the town before the work is done. so that whatever the cost of the project is, and whatever developer, or whatever contractor or installer the owner hired, that's still gonna be the cost. So that what the Appearance Commission and staff is saying here is that having the two quotes lets you see if there's at least two different prices in the ballpark, and it's not they happen to get a high quote, or they happen to get an unrealistic low quote that came in higher, and to be able to make sure that they're recommending the right amount to you for decision as part of the application. Very completely been the owner gets to pick his contractor, installer, and the cost of the receipt is the cost that's used to get the reimbursement.
So I can let go the two contractor thing of it. For two bids, it's not that big of a deal. To me, I just think it's silly, but I'm a contractor and I know what things cost, so, you know, in the absence of me or anybody that doesn't have that experience, I could see your point.
May I ask, is it realistic to get contractor quotes, or kind of to the other commissioner's point, an installer might not be a contractor under the law, but they might be the one doing the work. Mm-hmm. It might not require the GC for the work, but it might be some sub that's eligible to do it. So having two quotes.
Yeah, this might be a whole semantical thing that we're in, not
Yeah,
necessarily.
It matters.
It's going to have to enforce on the backside.
Yeah.
And the word contractor can be a stumbling point.
So to clarify my point in a nutshell, I don't care if it's contractor, subcontractor, handyman, whatever. I don't think that we need to manage the business owner getting two quotes. However, I'm ready to drop that, leave it as is, and just see if we can get it pushed through with the option for a business that is going to make a significant investment in our town to receive up to $10,000 through the downtown facade grant.
I'd be more comfortable with 5,000, cutting it down the middle, having two facade grant opportunities. I think you're right. It's not our job to, you know, negotiate prices with contractors and see who's getting a better deal, but it's also not the taxpayer's job to subsidize building renovations, period. So there's too much gray area and potential for fraud.
Motion to approve the downtown facade grant for up to $10,000.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve so this is the staff recommendation. Is that correct, Commissioner Carroll?
Correct.
Motion to approve the facade grant up to $10,000. It's the one that the staff recommended. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay.
Okay, 2-1. All right, item 6B is request for the town board to authorize negotiations with respondents to the town's RFQ for transportation and engineering services for pedestrian improvements on Wendell Boulevard. Mr. Bergmark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board. This item was referenced during one of our earlier items, but we're asking for authorization for the town manager to proceed with negotiations to the RFQ that we put out, So one of the priorities of this board, and this was reflected in our CIP and in our strategic plan, was looking at some pedestrian improvements along the Wendell Boulevard corridor, kind of between the school and the Food Lion Shopping Center. So we put out an RFQ for design work to move that project forward. This would entail essentially the construction of about 2,000 linear feet of sidewalk, filling in existing gaps along that stretch, closing off of Wall Street at its intersection with Wendell Boulevard, where it comes in right where Wendell Falls Parkway also comes in. It creates safety concerns and traffic movement issues because you essentially have a five-legged intersection. Looking at signalization and improvements to the Wendell Boulevard, Wendell Falls Parkway intersection. And then finally, looking at a realignment of Marshland Road just at its very end, so it comes in at not quite as sharp as of an angle. Now, because that would involve acquiring some property from property owners outside of the existing right-of-way, we also would ask for design work that could show if you couldn't acquire that right-of-way, how could you otherwise make pedestrian improvements to make more safe crossings there within the current right-of-way as well. So you had a concept plan included within your report that just kind of shows where these intersections are and where the gaps are. So again, we sent out an RFQ. We had 3 qualified firms submit letters of interest to provide this preliminary engineering and design services. This is all with the intent of us then pursuing LAP funding. So we talked about the funding that's available through CAMPO, but it requires local match as well. So what we're looking to do is essentially kind of on our own or upfront advance the actual design and engineering work and some of the environmental due diligence that's required so that we can create a reasonable cost estimate to submit for a LAP proposal to do the right-of-way acquisition where it's needed, which hopefully won't be a lot, as well as the actual construction. So the submittal for the right-of-way construction funds through LAP would be in October of this year, but the actual expenditure of those funds would not occur until October 2020. So that would leave us time to go ahead and complete all the design work ahead of that. So based on the preliminary cost estimates that we created, the CIP included $185,000 for design and engineering work for this project, with an additional $1.3 million for right-of-way acquisition and construction. Again, we'd be looking for LAP funding to help pay for that second portion of it. I mentioned we had 3 letters of interest. We've evaluated those letters of interest from the 3 firms, ranked their qualifications, and we're asking for you to authorize the manager and staff to begin negotiations with those 3 firms in that order of Kimley Horn, Raby, Kemp and Associates, and Johnson, Mirmarin, and Thompson. Following this, we'd then have a master agreement that would specifically lay out the scope of the services, deliverables, and the hourly rates that would correspond to the engineering work. So right now, we're looking for you to give a green light for us to enter negotiations.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bergmark?
Will we hear back from you guys before anything is agreed upon
We can, yeah.
and approved? So if we're entering negotiations now, it'd be great to know, I'm sure we're all going to want to know how much what we settle on.
Yes, definitely report back to you what the final agreement is, numbers, scope of work, all that gets reported out.
Once it's done though, right?
After we've negotiated the agreement.
After it's created, is that what you wanted to know? I think.
So basically before the contract is signed, I'd like to know how much money we're approved,
I think it would be done before we reported to us. I think we're authorizing the manager to handle it. Is that correct?
Correct. Within the budgeted amount.
Right.
Appropriated the funds. We're going through a state law process to acquire engineering services for a project that's anticipated to be above a certain amount. So we're asking now for approval in that process for me to do the agreement negotiation.
Are there any other questions? Comments?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Yep.
Make a motion that we approve agenda item 6B, request for the town board to authorize the town manager to enter negotiations with RFQ respondents for transportation and engineering services related to Wendell Boulevard pedestrian improvements.
All right. So we have a motion to authorize the town manager to enter in negotiations. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, item 7 is update on board committees by town board meetings. Commissioner Joyner's not able to be with us tonight.
Mayor?
Yes?
I'm prepared to give an update on happenings at the fire department if need be.
Let's hear it then.
I didn't attend the meeting, but I do attend the fire station right regularly. The fire department purchased and has received 4 brand-new extrication tools for use mainly for auto accidents, cutting open cars and rescuing entrapped people. They're brand-new, high-tech, battery powered. They don't require an external gasoline engine. They're a lot quieter. They're a lot more powerful. They're all self-contained. And we got 4 of them. A dedicated spreader, a dedicated cutter, and 2 combination cutter spreaders. They've been placed on the apparatus and are in service. I haven't had to use them yet, thank goodness, but they're on there. And also, word is on Station 3, being built off Wendell Falls Parkway, it is running way ahead of schedule, and rumor is maybe done as soon as Thanksgiving. Or sometime whereabouts, whereas the schedule or the contract was originally for beginning of February, I think.
Oh, I thought February something.
So, but the upside of it never raining is construction can go at quite a fast pace. So, there have been a few small setbacks, but the generator's been delivered. I'm not sure where they're going to put the nuclear fuel rods in it. It's absolutely enormous. But generator's been delivered. The roof is on, everything except for the bays. They're working on putting the interior walls up and running electrical right now. So it's coming together rather quickly.
Great, thank you. Technical Review Committee, Commissioner Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have 2 updates. If anybody was listening or here in June, I failed to give the update 2 meetings ago. So for that, for the June TRC meeting, we had Phase 7 of Wendell Falls, which is east of Martin Pond Road. It was a development or a phase of the development that was asked to be resubmitted, and we have not seen that back yet due to some, significant issues that couldn't be approved with conditions. I won't say significant, but issues that couldn't be approved with conditions. And then July's TRC meeting was Phase 9 of Wendell Falls, which was approved with conditions, as well as a development on Old Battle Bridge Road, Anderson Farm, and that project was also requested to be resubmitted for some issues that couldn't be corrected with conditions.
Okay, thank you. East Wake Senior Center Auxiliary, Commissioner Myrick.
Mayor, that meeting has been rescheduled for July 25th.
Okay. And typically I report on Campo on this night, but we do not meet in July. Let's hear a commissioner's report. Start with Commissioner Boyette.
None tonight.
And Commissioner Myrick.
Nothing tonight.
Commissioner Carroll.
No comment, Madam Mayor.
All right, well, real quickly, at our last meeting, Pastor Asa Bell was here and did our invitation for us to start our meeting, and he invited the board to come to attend their services yesterday, and I went with my husband, and we were very warmly greeted, and I appreciate the invitation. The service was wonderful. I want to congratulate the church. This was their 156th anniversary. That's, I feel like I need to brag about them a little bit. 156 years is a long time. That's quite a legacy. That church has seen a lot in 156 years, and it's still here. So they actually have published a booklet about their history, which I got a copy of. I'm going to pass along to the Historical Society for the museum. I think we need to have some of their history in our museum. So I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to getting another one. I'll go again. I'd love to be asked to come again. I want to congratulate our 8U Girls Softball All-Stars. They finished second in the Little Tar Heel League State Championships this past weekend in Currituck. I'm proud of them and how well they played and represented Wendell out in the world, and I appreciate that. And we'll be back next year better than ever, and we'll get them next year. It was a tough loss. I'm disappointed along with you. The boys 8U and 10U All-Stars will be competing in the state tournament this weekend, and that's being held in Smithfield beginning Thursday. And I wish them very good luck, and I hope people will go and watch them. That's close by. I think Bruce and I are planning to get over there for some of those games. I want to mention real quickly the parents of the kids that do all this ball game playing, softball and baseball, and travel all over, and they've got Wendell emblazoned all over their hats and shirts and everything, and they're just a great group of folks. I've been to a few games with them, especially in the last week or so, and I want to thank them for going and hauling their kids all over everywhere on our behalf. It's a lot, and I appreciate that. Let me see if there's anything else on here. We're having a great turnout this year at the farmers market. I hope that you'll go. There's no fee this year, vendor fee. If anyone's interested in being a vendor, it's from 9 to 1 on Campen Street. And I have some reminders, but actually those are really a ways away, so we'll come back to those another time. So, do we have a motion? Yes, sir.
Before you adjourn, just,
Yeah.
I wanted to point out, I just checked the statute to make sure. 6A, the facade grant program will have to have a second reading.
Because of the number of people here tonight?
It can pass with 3 on first reading, but it can't pass
With 2 to 1. All right, thank you. So now do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, we're adjourned.
You looking for me?